How's it going, guys? My name is Taki and I'm back again with another PVM gearing guide. Today we're going to be taking a look at invention perks for Bossing and Slayer. Let's get into it. Welcome back. On screen you can find a list of everything that I'll be covering in this guide. If you're new to my guides, you can find timestamps for everything that I'll talk about in the description box below. Let's go over the overview. This is a guide that I've wanted to make for a long time, as I felt the information on invention perks is far too spread out, or the information isn't applicable to people with low invention levels. The purpose of this guide is to show you upgrade paths for weapon and armor perks from level 1 invention all the way to max. This guide will show you invention perk paths for Bossing and Slayer. If you have any questions about anything in this guide, feel free to drop a comment below or join the Discord channel and I'll try my best to help you. Throughout this video, you will see that I have included level requirements for any perks that have specific levels, so you can use that as a gauge for when you should be upgrading your gear. At level 2 invention, you can start augmenting weapons. There aren't too many perks that you can access at this level that are worth using, but there are two decent ones that you should try to get. An easy one to get is Precise 2 or 3 with Equilibrium 1 or 2. You can get this perk with 5 precise components inside a weapon gizmo. This will increase your minimum hit, giving you a decent DPS increase. The other perk on screen can be seen as a filler, and that's going to be the Energizing and Invigorating combo. You can get 2 of these inside one weapon gizmo with 3 enhancing and 2 imbued components. Both of these perks will give you a small boost to adrenaline gain. At level 55 invention, you have the option of using a few different perks in your second slot. With 5 clockwork or precise components, you can get a flanking 1 or 2 perk, which will boost your damage on a few abilities whenever you are behind or flanking an enemy. This is a decent perk to obtain at this invention level if you're considering doing any team bossing in God Wars 2 or below, and you can ensure that you will not be the tank. If none of those things are true, you can go after the Dragon and Demon Slayer perk with a combination of enhancing, base, clear, and dexterous components. This is a good perk to use if you're considering doing any QBD or KBD or ED2, as it will give you a flat damage increase on those bosses. At 89 invention, you have access to the best in slot perks for weapons. In your main hand, you should have Aftershock 3, which requires 5 Ilijankan components. This perk is a flat DPS increase, and you should prioritize getting it as soon as you can. These components require 2500 Zerosian reputation from God Wars 2 to use. As a little side note, if you're planning on dual wielding, you want to make sure that you put Aftershock on your main hand weapon for your weapon switches. In your second slot, you should attempt to get Precise 4 Equilibrium 2, which is extremely rare. You should only try making these with high invention levels, or when you're under the boost of an extreme invention potion. You can settle for P3 E2 if you cannot obtain this perk. At 89 invention, you also have access to the best in slot perks for weapon switches. In your offhand weapon, you should attempt to go for Flanking 3 with 5 clockwork components. Make sure your weapon switch is around the same tier as your main equipment. Another offhand perk that's worth considering is the Lunging perk, which requires 5 Avernic components. This perk boosts damage on 3 bleed abilities. And finally, an Aftershock 1 Planted Feet perk is something that you should absolutely focus on obtaining, as it gives a sizable damage increase to mages and rangers. This perk requires 2500 reputation in Saren and Zaros from God Wars 2. Shields are very straightforward. In your tier 90 shields, you'll want to go for Turtling 2 or 3, which you can obtain from 5 evasive components. On your Spirit Shield, you should go for Lucky 5, which you can get very easily from 5 silent components. Now let's talk about the main armor perks. You can first augment legs at level 16 invention. The first perk that you should go for is Biting 1 or 2 with a combination of mobile. You can get this with 4 direct and 1 subtle component or 1 dexterous component. This will boost your crit hit chance and allow you to surge and escape more often. In your other slot, you should go for Dragon Slayer with a combination of enhancing, base, clear, and dexterous components. At level 74 invention, you have a ton of options for your gear. You're going to want to try and get Impatient 3 Devoted 2 with 5 Zamorak components. This is one of the best in slot perks for your gear, so you should prioritize getting it. This will boost your adrenaline gain and give you a few seconds of devotion proc. In your other slot, you can go after Dragon Slayer with the aforementioned combination, or you can go for Demon Undead Slayer with 1 Undead and 4 Dexterous components. This will give you boosted damage on mainly Barrows and Rots. Alternatively, you can go for Crystal Shield, which is extremely easy to get with 5 faceted components. This gives you a little shield from damage that you take.
And our best in slot comes in at level 90. The first perk is the one that I've just mentioned, although now it's going to be able to work in unison with our second perk. When Enhanced Devoted was initially released, it wasn't intended that both of these would be able to proc at the same time. I don't want to go too deeply into this, but as designed, these two perks should not be able to function together. Enhanced Devoted is always supposed to take priority over Devoted. However, after much speculation on this, a recent update to the buff bar shows us that these two perks do in fact work in unison, giving you a crazy amount of uptime on the Devotion ability. This is a known bug in the code publicly acknowledged by the Combat Council, but they have no intention of patching it, so make sure you run both of these together for the most optimal setup. Aim to upgrade your Devoted 2 to a 3, but if you can't get one, 2 will still be fine. Now on to Enhanced Devoted.
You can get this perk in the same way that you get Crystal Shield, although Crystal Shield is far more common at lower invention levels. For this reason, I recommend making this under the effects of an invention potion if your invention level is low. At level 46, you gain the ability to augment the chest slot. You're going to want to use the same Biting 2 mobile combination that you had on your legs, and you're going to want to move them over to your chest. Additionally, you can go after Biting 2 Venom Blood if you're planning on doing any PVM from bosses that have poison attacks. You can get this with 3 direct plus 1 healthy component and 1 evasive component.
If you plan on using the Mutated Barge ability, it's important that you do not go for the Biting Mobile combination.
In your other slot, you're going to want to use Crackling 2 or 3 with Mobile at level 49 Invention with 4 explosive components and 1 dexterous component or 1 subtle component. This ability will fire off a small attack at your enemy when it procs. There's not really a mid-tier for the body slot. At level 99, you have access to the best in slot perk with Biting 3. You can get this perk with 5 noxious components. This perk will give you a 6% chance to crit. In your other slot, you're going to want to continue to use Crackling Mobile from the previous tier. There are a couple of commonalities between the Bossing and the Slayer perk sets. In your leg slot, you should use Impatient 3 Devoted 2, which requires 74 Invention. If you have a lower level, you should consider using something from the Bossing tier until you have the level required. In your second slot, you should go after Dragon Demon Slayer in order to get the 7% boost on those tasks with the same enhancing, base, clear, and dexterous combinations from before. In your chest slot, you should go for Biting 2 Genocidal, which requires 74 Invention. You can obtain this with 3 direct components, 1 Bandos component, and 1 Undead component. This will boost the duration of your Slayer assignments. In your other slot, you should go for Crackling 3, which requires 4 explosive components and 1 imbued component. Now let's take a look at some of the components from the list that I've just given you that are difficult to obtain. The first is the Noxious component, and up until recently the only way to get this was to disassemble a staff, a scythe, or a bow. With a recent update, you can disassemble eyes and webs for 1 component each. This may not seem like a lot, but if you range Araxi, you will get a lot of webs and eyes, so you can potentially get a free Biting 3 just from disassembling things that would sit in your bank. You have a couple of options for your Aftershock components. The best and the fastest is to disassemble a level 9 Dragon Rider Lance, which should take you around an hour to get. This will put the cost of the Illajacken components at 5 mil each. You can also do the same thing with Animacore body and legs of Zaros. For your enhanced devoted components, you're going to want to be disassembling your daily crystal flasks or making empty light orbs, as both of those have decent rates of getting faceted components. You can also find them by going to this elf city that I'm not going to bother pronouncing and killing the elf warriors that drop them very commonly. After you get a bunch, recharge them and then disassemble them for easy faceted components. The relics that you get from Elite Dungeons are also a great source for a variety of components, especially clockwork components that you get from disassembling the common and uncommon drops.
And finally, you can take a look at the calculator page on any component that you're searching for and find the most cost-effective items to disassemble for that component. There's another option for components of all types if you're really strapped and you want to try out your luck. You can get the scavenging perk on something like a Crystal Halley or a Dragon Rider Lance with 5 precious components. Essentially, you're going to want to pick a place where you can farm large numbers of monsters since your chance of getting components is pretty low. An example of a decent place would be to go to the Abyss if you can find a good spot. I used this place for a few 99, so I was able to rack up a ton of uncommon and rare components from AFKing here. If you can find an empty world, the Abbey Demon spot in the Slayer Tower is also a great option for the scavenging perk. I also know of people that have had success doing Turoths and Viry Watches with scavenging perks. This method is really only worth doing if you need to AFK something or you don't need the perk slot for something better. Depending on what you get, you can end up saving anywhere from 2 to 5 mil from lucky component drops. If you have any questions about anything here or need advice on other PVM things, feel free to drop a question in the Discord linked in the description box below. I hope this guide helped you, and if it did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, Taki out.